Hello? Hello? Hi, everybody. I'd just like to ask everybody to take a seat now and get settled. We're going to start in 5 minutes. Thank you so much for coming.
Welcome to the celebration of the life of Elisabeth Christina Salm. To begin, if there's anyone who requires the assisted listening services, you can put up your hand and one of the ushers will bring a device to you. We'd like to welcome all the people who came from far. There are people from Australia, Japan, from California, and all across Canada. Elisabeth would have greeted you with that warm, open smile. We thank you for signing the guest book. If anyone has not had a chance to do that, it will be at the back at the end of the memorial. And because of the temperatures, water has been provided. If you need that, please ask. We ask that you turn your cell phones to silent, that if you plan on taking pictures, you don't use a flash, and we respectfully ask that you do not post to social media during this celebration. There are at every memorial very special family traditions. So behind me, the tea lights are part of the Salm family tradition. Elisabeth's sister-in-law, Vicky, is inviting you to participate in a tradition of her extended family. She says, her cousins, the Inuit, have taught her a reverence and respect for the honoring of tears we shed. Tears shed make space for healing and newness to come into our hearts and minds. A blessing basket has been placed at the back of the sanctuary. If you wish to have your tears join a future sacred fire, please leave your tissues of tears in that basket at the back. And there has been a fund established. The Elisabeth Christina Salm Fund is being established through the Ottawa Community Foundation. And the funds will support causes close to Elisabeth's heart, causes that echo her values. She lived her values. If you wish to donate, there will be information at the back on the right-hand side as you exit. I am Ruth Stewart Verger. I am a friend, met Elisabeth in high school. It was Elisabeth who every day after math lesson would reteach the whole lesson so that I could pass the course. We were roommates in university, and Elisabeth taught me the value of a very nutritious breakfast. She would serve cold pizza. In the 80s, I received bubbling letters of her travels, her projects, her geological wonders and magic from the tundra, the taiga, from Thunder Bay. And over the last 20 years, she and I have shared hours on bicycles. We've eaten delicious chocolate cakes together, either in her kitchen or my kitchen. And we've had endless conversations as we've tried to sort through the Canadian refugee and immigration policies and bureaucracies. Elisabeth loved music. She was an active member of the Brahms Choir for more than a decade. She was a secretary, then treasurer on the board of the Brahms Choir. Members of this local German community choir, directed by Christopher Askworth and accompanied by Svetlana Logian, will sing in memory of Elisabeth the first movement of Brahms' Requiem. Thank you. Elisabeth and I actually met in gym class. The teacher offered our class the opportunity to either do 40 minutes of calisthenics or to ride our bikes through the neighborhood. A good number of us chose bike riding because it was going to be much easier. Elisabeth chose bike riding, but she lived in Honey Gables, 10 kilometers out of the city along a country road highway with no paved side. So she rode that gravel on the side of the highway all the way into school. And then she rode around a few blocks with the rest of us. And at the end of the day, of course, she had to ride all the way back home. Anyone who knew her knew she had a passion for cycling. And it began early. Lyle has asked that we have her bicycle here to help remember how she lived those values of riding instead of driving, of being kind to the earth and walking gently upon it. Elisabeth has 4 siblings, 4 amazing, wonderful people. Of course, growing up in her family, she had to be wonderful. They had to be that kind of endearing and calming. And I invite them up to tell you a little bit about their recognition or remembrances of Elisabeth. To her family, she was known as Dija. Thank you. Dija.
My name is Lucan, the first of 5 siblings. Next in line was Elisabeth Christina, who I'm responsible for nicknaming Gisha, which later became Gis. This name felt completely right. But when I went to primary school, some of my classmates found it important to let me know that calling her Gis was swearing. As someone from a Dutch household who was just learning English, that made no sense to me. And the nickname stuck. I would love to share with you a memory that characterizes Gis as a sister. Our grandfather Salm helped to set up a family organization in the Netherlands, which was symbolized by a salmon, the creature whose name we proudly bear. It is an amazing, supportive network of relatives. For the 75th anniversary of the Salm family organization, a weekend was planned in a lovely Mennonite retreat center in the Netherlands, and a call-out was made early on for performers. I agreed to perform a puppet show. However, how realistic was that? I was a full-time student and would be traveling with my first baby, Harriet. Did I have a show ready? No, but I had a baby. And wasn't the baby just as wonderful as a show? I felt totally fine about this. Arriving with Gis at the event, our Tante Wendela insisted that since my show was on the program, I needed to stick to my promise. I looked at Gis with an SOS expression, and she responded calmly, "Let's get to a quiet room to plan our presentation." The room they gave us was full of Bibles, and Gis got an idea. She turned to the Genesis origin story about the children of Israel, and with some clever editing, changed things around to represent the burgeoning of our own family tree. She wrote a script, and we got together a large group of kids who brought beds, sheets, and flashlights over from the dormitories. I stood at the lectern with a large kerchief on, solemnly reading Elisabeth's script, And as I was reading about the begetting of each family member, the flashlights would burst on and a child would crawl out from under the sheets. People found this hilarious. The senior family members, Mennonites, had their heads bowed, mistaking it for actual scripture, while missing all of the silliness behind. They called out after each satirical passage, "So is it, so is it," which means amen, amen. It was a ridiculously successful spectacle, and Jesus saved my reputation just by using the resources at hand. So upon this occasion, I would like to finally give her the credit that she deserves. So is it, so is it.
Hello, I'm Elisabeth's youngest brother, Flo. Elisabeth came into my life 56 years ago when I was born. And when Mom brought me home from the hospital, and there she was, smiling away. Just like every memory I have of my sister includes that very warm, infectious smile. She enjoyed life and all the things came with it. You might have noticed on the slideshow that even her dog Tessa had a vibrant smile. I always looked up to her even though I became taller, but I was so darn proud of her. She was literally fantastic at everything she set out to do. I'd call her a born natural. For half her life, she was married to her best friend and soulmate, Lyle Young, who I feel is cut from the same cloth. Thank you, Lyle, for bringing so much joy and happiness to my sister's life. You both know how to live a productive life, world travelers extraordinaire. I'm still in awe how your passports are stamped from cover to cover. When our father died in 1975 in a car accident, Jees was the only one who witnessed it. However, she never talked about it. And the character of this wonderful woman, she quietly stepped up to the plate, playing a leading role in helping Mom, who had to go to work to raise us kids. This taking on responsibilities continued throughout my sister's life. Whenever a family member found themselves in times of trouble, Elisabeth was always there. And I am certainly no exception. My family is forever grateful for Elisabeth's coming to our rescue, even when not called upon, and I think it's fair to say that she kept us together as a family. And we really feel for you, Lyle. And now you are in times of trouble. We want you to know that we siblings of Jesus are there for you. We won't.
So is it.
So is it. We will miss and cherish you forever, sweet Jesus.
I'm Roland, born 1 year after Elisabeth. I'd like to tell you a couple stories about her that stand out for me. One day when I was 8 years old, Elisabeth was sitting on the living room couch, peacefully watching The Flying Nun. Being her little brother, I walked up to the TV, flipped the channel to Batman, plunked myself down on the floor in front of her. Look, we only had one TV and 2 channels. So Elisabeth launched herself from the couch in Sally Field-like fashion, with the intent, I'm sure, of flying over me to the TV to reset the channel. As one might surmise, she fell short and landed on top of me with a thud. Kapow. In the process, she broke my collarbone. I'm sure that anyone who knows Elisabeth would know that this to be completely out of character. I mean, we're talking about someone who uses cruelty-free spider traps to relocate spiders from the house into the yard. She felt terrible about putting her brother in the hospital, I'm sure. And I know that never again did we resort to settling disagreements in this manner. And we both took away a powerful message about how not to resolve conflict with aggression. Here's another little piece about Jace. About 7 years ago, my son Skylar and I traveled to Ottawa from Vancouver for a school-related event he was involved in. At that time, Elisabeth and Lyle were living intermittently between Boston and Ottawa, and Elisabeth suggested we all go to their place in Boston to participate in a half marathon. Both Jace and Skylar had never been in a marathon before, but had been training under Lyle's very particular training regimen. For those of you who don't know, Lyle is a seasoned veteran runner and an obvious mentor in all things marathon. On the day of the race, I parked myself at the finish line, camera in hand, to document this historic family event. I saw the crowd coming in and trained my camera on the finalists. I saw my son, and I saw Elisabeth finishing, and cursed myself for missing Lyle. So I panned my camera across the crowd one last time, and off in the distance, I could see Lyle huffing and puffing towards the finish line. I did a double take. My sister Elisabeth had smoked Lyle in the marathon without even breaking a sweat. Elisabeth often talked about that marathon, but never, ever did she mention that she'd beaten Lyle. So now you all know. Sorry, Lyle. But this story is so telling about our dear sister's character. When she committed to something, she was all in. Determination, perseverance, strength, humility, and respect are adjectives that come to mind. Elisabeth, Jace, we will miss you so dearly.
So I'm Mundi, the youngest of the Salm siblings. One of Jace's and my running jokes was that we were twins. I was born on her 8th birthday, and Jace would say to me that I was the best birthday present ever. I used to get so excited the night before our birthday, because then I could sleep over in her room. Our family tradition was to be woken up with Dutch birthday songs and a tray with candles, a little drink, a snack, and cards and gifts to be opened in bed. Doing this together with my big sister always made me feel so special. From when I was about 17, people used to mix us up when they saw us in the street until they got up close. Jace and I used to laugh about that. We would often hear the remark from people when we'd be meeting together about how we must be sisters, and we would respond with our standard spiel that, yes, we're twins, born on the same day, 8 years apart. But as the years went by, the responses to this changed in subtle ways. First, people started wondering that there were 8 years between us. And then, people became unsure about who was older. And And more recently, people guessed I must be the older one. This progression made me quite annoyed. I mean, come on, obviously she was my big sister. So it's funny, but it's almost like G stopped aging after a while. Unlike the rest of us, she was super fit, riding her bike everywhere, rushing about from activity to activity, this incredible bundle of energy. Pretty well, always cheerful and sweet. She also had a sweet way of living her ideals thoroughly, without being aggressive about it. Especially inspiring to me was how she lived and breathed her sustainability principles no matter what. So, for example, when Gis and Lyle got married, she insisted on having 0 disposable items at the reception. She would not approve of these bottled water things, but anyway. Which also meant no paper napkins. So she went out and bought a big piece of pink linen, and in rotation with my mom and aunt, sewed about 80 napkins for the reception. We spent quite a bit of time and energy ironing all those cute little napkins one by one, both before and after the wedding. But the point was, we were not throwing anything away. We got used to seeing those napkins when we'd eat at Gis and Lyle's place, and she even lent them out to others, like to my friend Rachel for her wedding. Every few years, my family and I came to visit Gis and Lyle and keep noticing new developments in the house at 107 Stanley. One mystery was the big glass bottles by the kitchen sink and bathtub. So you know, when you run the tap water, waiting for it to warm up for your shower or to wash the dishes, well, my sister, rather than wasting all that cold water down the drain, captured it in those bottles to later use for watering her plants. How inspiring is that? Gis really cared about planet and people. She was such a great sister and aunt. When Mom died in 2001, she became our surrogate mother, calling us up and visiting wherever we were, whether that was British Columbia, Holland, Mozambique, or Japan. She knew more than anyone else what was going on with the rest of the family, and she would keep us up to date with all the latest news. Without a doubt, we will deeply miss our dear, wise, and thoughtful sister in times ahead.
Elisabeth had an amazing family on both sides. And she had friends, has friends. Henny is going to speak a little bit. Henny and Elisabeth have been friends since the 1970s. And when you saw the two of them together talking, you knew that depth of friendship was there.
I was introduced to Ange, the mother of the Psalms, in the summer of 1975. It was wonderful to be able to communicate in Dutch. In January after this, my husband, myself, and our son were invited to celebrate Epiphany at their house, where I met the children. Elisabeth was a teenager at the time. My friendship was at first mostly with Ange, whom I saw regularly at church. I got to know Elisabeth better when she returned to Ottawa, having finished her studies and research. After becoming a member of our church in 1990, she served on many committees. In 1994, she became the clerk and served in this position with great dedication to all the details this job requires. After several years, the members elected her to be first reader. The first reader conducts the Sunday morning services, as well as the Wednesday evening testimony meetings. It is a full-time job, which Elisabeth obviously loved. Her readings were always very inspiring. During this time as reader, Ange came to live with her and Lyle because she was in need of help, and the other children either lived abroad or elsewhere in Canada. Elisabeth, with her natural, sunny, loving nature, took care of her mother with great energy and love, always joyful. After her mother's passing, she and Lyle moved to Boston, where Lyle had been asked to be first reader. Elisabeth, of course, volunteered on several committees at the Boston Church. They welcomed many visitors to their home, as they had done in Ottawa. When Lyle's 3-year term finished, the Ottawa community was very happy to see them back in their own house. Elisabeth served as secretary on the board for several years and was a Sunday school teacher. She had volunteered many times in the reading room and about 6 years ago was happy to become the head librarian. The reading room is a place for the public. People come in to study the Bible and the Christian Science publications, or with questions about our faith. On Fridays at noon, we usually study the Bible lesson together with members of the public. Although to some people it might often look very quiet, it is a place of action and prayer to uplift the community. Elisabeth made sure that we had a focus for each day by writing down a text either from the Bible or from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. Last Thursday morning, she wrote this text from the Bible, from Galatians. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. I know that she is walking on in the Spirit.
Elisabeth loved being an aunt, and she was rather good at it. Her nieces and nephews speak very highly of her, and they liked spending time with her. The next generation of the Salm family is represented by Elisabeth's niece, Harriet Salm, and her partner, Alora Kennedy.
Hello. I'm hoping I can catch a few smiles while I'm up here, because that's the only way that I can remember Jisha. Smiling. So we're here to share some stories from Jisha's nieces and nephews on the Salm side of the family. There's many of us. We all want to be here. One thing I noticed as I was collecting these stories is there were themes. It speaks to how consistent Jisha was and how she cared for all of us equally and showed us so much love. Jisha was the perfect example of seeing the glass as half full. And I mean that literally. When we went out to a restaurant, she would ask for half a glass of water because she knew she wouldn't finish the other half. Talk about water conservation. She loved this world, its people, everyone, and our environment. In countless ways, she has inspired the choices that I've made in my life. Whether it's biking, reducing my waste, or simply being mindful, I'll be following her example. Jisha was the only member of my family that was shorter than I am. But if you could measure love in inches, she would tower over everyone here. Despite our geographic distribution, my cousins and I, she made an effort to connect with all of us. She would always send postcards or take us out for ice cream when we visited. She was always there for us. She even got up early to be a part of my 30th birthday parade before my 6 a.m. shift last year. It's pretty early.
So we're going to continue by reading some stories that cousins have sent in who either couldn't be here or just weren't able to speak. So Luca and Nikolai write, "We would come over from Holland, and no matter what, Jish and Lyle would be waiting for us at the airport. Jisha was always ready for anything. She over-prepared for guests. She always had a gazillion cakes and cookies on hand. She would have food to feed 20 people, even when there were only 2 coming." Nikolai loved baking with Jish. Our breakfasts in Ottawa are the reason I asked for a waffle iron for my birthday one year. I would still have liked to learn from her how to make lemon meringue pie. Jish loves baking a lot. We did a lot of bike trips around Ottawa, and she would always organize bikes before we came, assuring that we would have the right size for our comfort. Luca teases, saying that Jish's jokes were not that funny, but how she would laugh about them anyways, and that would make us laugh as well. We really liked how Jish and Lyle were very interested to hear about what we were into. The last time we were over, she organized a Bollywood hockey movie because Nikolai was really into hockey.
I have a few memories from my brother Jens. When I'd visit, she'd always try to provide a meal. Then we'd talk about birds and gardens for a while, not to mention a handful of, dare I say, obsolete expressions thrown in. These were the moments I remember fondly, like time spent with a dear friend. I spent a few years living at Jisha and Lyle's place. I was always impressed at how calmly they worked. Around that time, I started learning how to dance, and I would practice in the room right beside Jisha's office. She seldom complained about the noise, though I was stomping and crashing for hours at a time. She was usually very calm unless hand towels were put away without being folded or I didn't use my cutlery quite properly.
Amika writes, "Jisha has been attentive to everything in my life, committed to supporting and sharing every important moment, always encouraging me to expand my vision of myself and the world. After I graduated high school, she and Lyle brought me on an incredible trip across southern Africa, and this past April, we traveled together in Japan. During both trips, I rarely felt like a tourist observing sights. Always, even in a foreign country, she reached out to people in the community. She has a curiosity of people that was bridged distances and warmed hearts and sincerity that inspired people."
From my sister Anna. One memory is at the forefront of my mind. I must have still been in elementary school at the time, and it was sunny and beautiful outside, much like earlier today. So we decided to go canoeing on the river behind the house. The cool breeze refreshed us as we paddled aimlessly around the river. If we found anything floating in the water, we picked it up and put it on the floor of the canoe. But before long, our outing instead became a hunt for whatever we could find in the river. We fished out all sorts of things, including so many tennis balls, New Edinburgh, and for some reason, in completely different areas of the river, 3 coconuts. As much as I love and treasure this memory of a perfect summer day, it isn't so much the singular memories of her that stand out to me. It is instead the feeling that I would have whenever I came over to the house, the immense care that she put into all the amazing meals that she fed us, and the aura of love that surrounded her.
Elisabeth was delighted to have a second family, Lyle's family. She felt it was a gift. Her sister-in-law, Vicky Baldo, is going to be sharing from her cremate tea community and culture, a woman's honor song, the Dene Healing Song. Thank you. Elisabeth was very much a part of this community in Ottawa. Richard McClure and his family are longtime neighbors. Elisabeth and Lyle have known them for years and watched their family grow. Richard will speak of Elisabeth's involvement in the local community and of her involvement in helping two families come to Ottawa as refugees.
So Lyle asked me to compile some reflections and some recollections that neighbors and members of refugee committees had of Elisabeth. And he gave me the impossible task of doing this in 4 minutes, or speaking in 4 minutes. So I've really had to kind of cut down, and just there's some extracts from the reflections of these people. So from the St. Bart's Refugee Committee, from the St. Bartholomew Church Refugee Committee, Elisabeth's immediate offer to provide temporary housing for the Audubon family was extraordinarily generous, and all the more amazing in that she was not a member of St. Bart's, and she had never met any of us before, with the exception of Liz, nor had she been involved before that point with the Audubons. It became ever clearer as our contact with Elisabeth continued that she was a truly exceptional person. And from the New Edinburgh Refugee Committee, Over the past 2.5 years, as we prepared for Mohammed and Rhea to arrive, Elisabeth always had information or resources from another group that she was connected with and which she shared with us, and this made the work so much easier for us. We were amazed at how well connected she was within the community. When Mohammed and Rhea arrived with their 2 girls in April, just this past April, Elisabeth and Lyle selflessly offered their home and time to ensure that the family felt love and deep community support as their first experience in Canada. Elisabeth offered impromptu cycling lessons for both Mohammed and Rhea, and on one occasion gave the girls something to catch ants inside the house and take them outside without hurting them. Ants are even smaller than spiders. She literally wouldn't hurt an ant. Kind and welcoming are the words that Mohammed and Rhea have used to describe Elisabeth. Indeed, Mohammed and Rhea, and I'm guessing you are there, your arrival was for Elisabeth a blessing. One of the last things Elisabeth told Rhea was that she needed flowers to make her house a home. The day Elisabeth died, before we had heard the tragic news, we went shopping with Rhea and bought flowers that she planted later that day. They were truly flowers for Elisabeth. And from neighbors, and I'm just going to give you some just quotes from people. Elisabeth routinely offered help, such as carrying out the refuse and the recycling boxes and putting them back at the end of the day for me. Though we didn't speak every day, Elisabeth's presence was often felt by the sound of the back gate opening and closing as she walked through with her bike out into Stanley Park, ready for the day, rain or shine, or back home to the welcoming sight of her abundant trellis of roses. We will remember Elisabeth as a friend and a neighbor, always helping to share gardening tips, commiserate about the snow shoveling, chat about the children, and share in the quiet street life of Stanley Avenue. She was a warm, gentle soul, and she will be missed. And from 3 children, and I'll name them. From Sarah. Every fall, Elisabeth would tell us we could pick apples from her apple tree. We would bring a ladder over, and she would say to us to take as many as we wanted because the apples were there for everybody. And from Lily. Elisabeth would always come by my lemonade stand. She would contribute to our cause, whether it was for charity or just for ourselves. Sometimes she would only give me money or get a normal cup and not use our plastic ones. And once she was biking somewhere and we filled up her water bottle with lemonade. Elisabeth gave us an extra 50 cents for doing that. P.S. I always loved her garden. It's so pretty. And from Malika. One day I was outside playing with my friend and I tripped on a stick and started to cry. And then Elisabeth came outside of her house and asked me what was wrong, and I told her I hurt my knee. And so she went back into her house and came out with a cotton bandage, and she put it on my knee, and she gave me some water to drink. Finally, in summing up what we've all come to realize, and this is again from St. Bart's Committee, Elisabeth was filled with extraordinary charity and a bone-deep goodness that rarely is to be found. The second commandment, to love thy neighbor, comprised the fiber of Elisabeth's very being.
Dale Young is Lyle's oldest sister. Marie-France Aird Young is Lauren's daughter, and Elisabeth's first niece on the Young side. Dale and Marie-France were known to Elisabeth almost as long as she knew Lyle. And the 3 were described as kindred spirits. Dale? Marie-France?
The Young family has enjoyed the privilege of knowing Elisabeth for over 25 years. In that time, we have come to think of her as one of our own, someone we loved and cherished, and who was always quick to love and support us in return. Over the last couple of days, my mother, my siblings, and their partners have enjoyed sharing our memories of Elisabeth. I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, to find that many of these memories centered around food. Lyle and Elisabeth, as a couple, were great hosts, and Elisabeth was a welcoming and amazing cook who nurtured us with her culinary talents. However, we did not realize what a great talent we had in our midst until she and Lyle moved to Boston and hosted a dessert party by way of introducing themselves to the church community they would be serving. The day of the party, my brother Lorne came to visit with 2 of his late teen children and found Elisabeth busy in the kitchen making desserts. Lorne and the 2 kids were commandeered to pass around dessert trays at the party. The event was a great success. One guest was impressed enough by the food to ask Elisabeth for the name of her caterer. Elisabeth looked confused and answered she'd done all the cooking herself, and the servers were simply her niece and nephew. How very like Elisabeth to undertake a momentous task in a matter-of-fact way with not a lot of thought about the work involved. Elisabeth could be quite adventurous when it came to cooking for others. During one of her recent phone calls to my mom, she shared that she had read that goat stew was a favorite dish in Syria and that she had found a recipe and was looking for goat meat so she could make stew for a Syrian refugee family she was supporting. A few weeks later, my mom inquired about the stew, and Elisabeth reported, perhaps less than enthusiastically, well, the kids liked it. Well, Elisabeth, maybe it will just take some time for the adults to acquire a taste for goat stew made the Canadian way. Elisabeth had great compassion for animals. During one phone conversation between her and my husband, Ed, she asked what he was up to, and he replied he just finished setting traps to catch the squirrels that were destroying our garden. Elizabeth's voice raised as she demanded, "You're not killing them, are you?" Ed assured her he was not, but merely relocating them to a nice park sufficient miles from our home to discourage them from finding their way back. Her voice returned to normal as she said, "Well, that's good, but you need to be aware that you might be taking a mother and be leaving some young squirrels orphaned," which did give my husband pause for thought. In addition to being an animal advocate, and this has been mentioned before, Elisabeth was a great conservationist, and she lived her principles in small ways on a daily basis. She would have nothing to do with plastic bags, went to great lengths, as others have said, to preserve water in her home, and we've heard the story about asking for only half a glass of water in the restaurant because she did not want to waste such a precious resource. Elisabeth, we thank you for the love, the joy, and the wisdom that you brought to our family. You taught us many important lessons about loving, nurturing, and caring about God's creatures and his earth around us. These are your legacy to us. They will not be forgotten.
Maybe it was her curly hair, or maybe it was something in the glow of her face and smile. We all went from children to adults, with her by our side, and somehow it seemed like Elisabeth never aged a single day. It must have been partly because she sang or traveled or had faith in something bigger than us, because she was curious and open to the world, or because she spoke more languages than any person we'd ever met. But us, the nieces and nephews, never noticed the weight of time on her spirit or body. A few Christmases ago, our cousin Will was in Regina at Grandma's condo with Lyle and Elisabeth. Grandma was making a turkey and needed to get it back in the oven, so she asked for help. Elisabeth stepped in and picked it up expectantly, waiting for Grandma to open the oven door. When Grandma saw Elisabeth holding this large bird, she gasped and said, "Elisabeth?" as though she would get a herniated disc. Elisabeth just handled the turkey unfazed, showing that she was more than capable of doing a little heavy lifting. Our cousin Sasa found Elisabeth very impressive, especially one time when she put Lyle in his place while speaking Dutch. She was also delightful to discuss and share ideas with. For instance, our cousin Nathan, who is a park ranger in Saskatchewan, remembers her great enthusiasm for ecology. This one time, she and Lyle had seen a documentary about the decline of songbirds worldwide. She was so keen to talk about that topic with Nathan. One day, after he was back home in Saskatchewan, a package arrived in the mail. It was a copy of the DVD. Brendan remembers how welcoming they were when he would visit and how much his one-year-old son, Percy, enjoyed playing with Elisabeth. The last time I saw Elisabeth, I was going through a difficult transition in my life, and I remember talking endlessly with my mom in French as Elisabeth cooked with us in the most gentle way. Her presence was soothing and soft, even in the absence of words. Her silence was so full of love. In fact, it was in her silence that I received the greatest gift from Elisabeth. It was her presence. My heart was heavy that day, as it is today, and yet I could feel her presence, like I do today, seeping in like a grace, seeping in like the smell of lilacs in May. As the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh would say, the most precious gift we can offer anyone is our attention. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. Elisabeth saw us grow from children to now, and whether it was through laughter, thoughtfulness, intelligence, food, or love, her presence was rich and unforgettable. It helped us each in our way bloom and become a better version of ourselves.
Jorge Thorger is going to introduce us to Elisabeth, the environmentalist. We all knew that side of Elisabeth. Jorge is an advocate of local action to combat causes of climate change, and he and Elisabeth worked together on a number of projects.
Thank you. Lyle asked me to keep my remarks to 2 minutes, which is kind of difficult, so I'll be as brief as I can. I first met Elisabeth as a co-volunteer for Ecology Ottawa, and as an opposer, someone opposing the Energy East pipeline. And the reason that we oppose the Energy East pipeline is because the pipeline carried crude from Alberta, from the tar sands, to the east coast of New Brunswick, primarily for export. And what that was for was to be able to expand the tar sands by 30%, which meant that there would be much more crude used and converted into greenhouse gases, therefore contributing to climate change, which is something that Elisabeth and I have nightmares about. The other reason was a local one, and that is that the Energy East pipeline crossed the Mississippi River just here, and the Mississippi River empties into the Ottawa just upstream of the 2 water treatment plants that feed our drinking water. And a spill of the Energy East pipeline, and spills are common, in fact, they're very regular in all pipelines, would get into our drinking water, contaminating it and making us sick. So we had a bond even before we met, and when I did go to meet Elisabeth, I suggested to her, look, why don't we have all candidates debate about the environment and ask them to address the Energy East pipeline? Because there was a city election coming up for councillors, and Toby Nussbaum, I don't know if he's still here, was one of those candidates. And she said, yes, sure. And that was actually a bit of a surprise to me because I had just known her. Neither of us had any idea of how to go about this because we'd never done it before. But we quickly got to work, and she had excellent ideas, and so we made this happen. In the course of the work that we were doing, and there was quite a lot of it, it was quite hard, we invited some volunteers to help us, and we asked for some help from Ecology Ottawa, some logistical help, and got that. And I found out that in our work, Elisabeth was all of the things that have been described. She was a loving person, she was cheerful, she was kind, she was gentle, she had a wonderful, sweet manner. But beneath all of that was a very determined, strong woman with very high principles. And she was not deterred by the obstacles that we faced, or even by some of the opposition that we faced. She was a very, very valuable member and made it happen. So the debate occurred, and despite the doubts of many people about it, it was a big success. A standing room only, and people did address not only the environment in general, but they did address the Energy East pipeline. And Elisabeth, although reluctantly, because we had to push her to do it, was the moderator of that event. In fact, the pattern of that, of how we worked, became the model for 3 more debates on the environment and Energy East, both federally and provincially in election time. So I'd just like to finish with a reflection about Elisabeth, a short one. In North American culture, people are told, be the best that you can be. Strive for the top, for the stars. Be successful. Be famous. But you know, that's all about one person. Me, and me. Elisabeth was much bigger than that. She had all the talent, all the knowledge, all the necessary things for success, achievement, and she did manage to have all those things. But she used all of those talents and all of those skills and knowledge to help others, to make this planet a better place. In fact, Elisabeth was a world citizen, and we sure need more of them. The environment movement here in Ottawa is going to miss Elisabeth a great deal. But those of us who were fortunate to work with her will carry her legacy in our hearts. And I am glad that I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be one of those people. Thank you very much.
Our woman of steel. Eric Nickerson has been a friend of Lyle and Elisabeth for almost 4 decades. In fact, he introduced them one to the other. Lyle asked Eric to read a letter from Bruce Hayer. Bruce is a longtime friend of Elisabeth. They worked together in Thunder Bay, and Bruce is currently the deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario. Thank you for reading his words.
Thank you, Ruth. And Bruce, I know you're listening on the live feed of this celebration. And I just want to add that Elisabeth's eyes would widen with delight when she spoke of her adventures with you up there in God's country. You were truly her good friend. So I'll read your words now. Elisabeth was my friend for well over 30 years, and I must say she was the kindest, dearest, cheeriest, most generous, most considerate person I have ever known, really. Following in her father's footsteps, Elisabeth trained to be a scientist, but in the field of geology. She was really, really good at it. Her biggest achievement in her geology career was that she did the groundwork and modeling for a mine 2 hours east of Thunder Bay. I visited her there several times, and the fellow geologists and mine workers were in absolute awe of her professionalism, dedication, smarts, determination, and just plain toughness. Elisabeth might have weighed 98 pounds. But each morning she would load her pack with lunch, compass, maps, shovel, rock hammer, and head out to collect rock specimens. At first, everybody worried about her. They soon realized that she would be back with a pack full of rock samples that often weighed as much as she did. In that pre-digital age, she crafted a 3-dimensional model of the zinc sulfide deposit using various materials that included drinking straws to indicate drilling pathways. She nailed it. The mine went ahead. Her model was unbelievably accurate, and she played a major role in creating jobs and prosperity in our region. Ironically, when the shaft was opened, the chauvinistic mining males would not let her go down into the mine, saying it was bad luck for a woman to do so. Eventually, she tired of sharing ATCO trailers with miners and became more interested in sustainability. She was extremely helpful in working with me to preserve millions of acres of unspoiled forests, lakes, and rivers, now known as Wabakimi Wilderness Park. Twice the size of PEI. If I can be called the father of Wabakimi, Elisabeth could be called the godmother. Above all, Elisabeth was a dear friend. She had a special bond with my 150-pound Great Pyrenees. I say my dog, but really Kimi and Elisabeth were quite the soulmates. Many people in Thunder Bay remember Elisabeth with fondness. Like me, they were dumbstruck with grief at the terrible news of her death. I will confess that among my first thoughts was revenge against the person who hurt her. But upon reflection, I know that Elisabeth would not agree. She would try to understand and would likely do what she has always done. She would hate the sin, but love the sinner. As we go forward in life, we could all do well to emulate Elisabeth, kind, positive, hardworking, honest, and above all, loving.
Music was a very important part of Elisabeth's daily life. Juliana Krajkovic will be singing Climb Every Mountain. Juliana is a soprano soloist who Elisabeth came to know through her church. She'll be accompanied by Luis Camaco. Elisabeth, she lived her dreams. And one of the most precious dreams was that life she lived with Lyle. They were married 28 years ago. And these two are partners in every sense of the word.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you very much, Juliana and Luis. The strong voice of true womanhood can never be silenced. And now I'd like to invite a Sunday school student at our church to come up and join me to recount in her own words the story of Joseph from the Bible. This is Mika Bakshi. Thank you for joining me, Mika.
Thank you. Once there was a man named Jacob. He had 12 sons. His favorite was Joseph. Jacob made Joseph a special coat of colors, which made his brothers very jealous. His brothers wanted to get rid of him. They threw him into a pit and beat him. They showed their father his blood-stained coat to prove his death. His father was sad for 20 years, believing that Joseph had died. Joseph had been sold into slavery in Egypt, but did great things.
That's it. And so the kind of the theme of the story is that Joseph really hadn't died. Thank you very much. And so that and so the tragedy wasn't that Joseph had died. The tragedy was that his father went on mourning for years, thinking that he had died. Relative to Gis, there was also blood and other evidence. In the case of Joseph, there was this bloodied coat that his brothers had dipped in the blood of an animal, and it was very persuasive evidence that Jacob's son was dead. But the evidence was false, and they found that out later. Joseph had simply gone on serving God. And in the same way, Elisabeth, Jisha, has just gone on serving God, and as we grow spiritually, we'll see her, that she cannot be separated from good in the same way that we're not separated from good. I believe that there is a sacred space that is beyond a physical location. That space is the consciousness of the oneness that we each have with the divine and with each other, in harmony and peace. The world cannot violate that space. I also believe that the essence of womanhood isn't physical or biological, subject to assault. Rather, it's spiritual, a pure reflection of one Father, Mother, God. And because it's spiritual, it is untouched, safe, and free. As for the city itself, it is composed of spiritual sons and daughters of this one God. This understanding inspires us and gives us the courage to make this a safer city, a city filled with compassion and forgiveness for all. Now, changing gears, the bicycle. A perfect symbol. Just look at it. I'm going to bring it a little closer. The perfect symbol for all that Jisha believed. The perfect symbol for all that Jisha believed. One, the bicycle is a very Dutch thing. Two, it quite literally runs on air, either in the tires or in the lungs, and contributes to urban sustainability. Three, when you're biking, you're part of the community. You're not behind a windshield or sitting behind a closed door. Fourth, it's inexpensive. Fifth, it's total freedom and fun. We biked most days and took trips in Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Alberta, and the Netherlands. In the printed tribute, I talked about Jisha working through the night under the covers on the floor of a Tokyo apartment. This was perfect Jisha. Undercover, very quietly, preparing her own home in every way so that it would be ready for people to live in while she wasn't there, people she'd never met. True Jisha, responding to one of humanity's great crises by preparing her own kitchen, her own bedrooms, etc., for refugees. Mohammed, Rhea, Hala, and Hela. And I don't know if you're here this afternoon, are you? Yes, back here, I think. Mohammed, Rhea, Hela, and Hala, you were taken under the wing. And to be taken under the wing is like a bird, a mother bird takes its wing and puts its young under its wing. You were taken under the wing of a great Canadian. Welcome to Canada. I always thought that Jisha was beautiful, and I told her so much that she finally asked me to cut it out. But I couldn't. So I invented ways to say it like, "You are so beep." More than just being in love, we were entirely united in our sense of purpose. For some 22 years of our marriage, I was either traveling a ridiculous amount, the peak was to 30 countries in 2010, or we were going back and forth between Ottawa and Boston and living in separate cities, separate countries much of that time. But we did love each other deeply. And we told each other that every day, and most days, many times. Now, we greatly enjoyed having guests. And when we said goodnight to them, I would almost always say, "Now listen, we're sleeping in the room just next to you. So if there's anything at all you need at night, don't hesitate. It will be no trouble at all for me to get Elisabeth up to get it for you." It always provoked a laugh because it was so clearly understood that of course she would do it. And she supported me when I, as a Christian Science practitioner, would get phone calls during the night, people asking me to pray for them, 4, 5, 6 calls a night. She's never complained that her sleep was being disturbed. Not once. The last song that we listened to together the morning before she headed out for the reading room was Jean-Pierre Ferland's "Y a pas deux chansons pareilles." I thought what I would do is just sing you 2 verses of that song, and then I'll come back and talk about the words. Y a pas deux chansons pareilles. Les plus simples sont les plus jolies. Un traîneau, un soir de veille, un fado comme joue la pluie. Y a pas deux chansons pareilles. Les plus belles sont les moins connues. On les joue quand elles sont vieilles, comme un beau malentendu. For me, the meaning of the main line, "Y a pas deux chansons pareilles," no 2 songs are ever alike, represents the total uniqueness of every individual. And that's what Jisha was seeing and honoring. Each and every individual absolutely special as a perfect, unique reflection of the divine. That's why she always wanted to include everyone, because in her eyes, everyone was wonderful. I don't claim to know specifically what Jis is doing right now, but believe me, I do know this. in some way, in some form, she is biking on a bicycle whiter than this one. And one last point, she is going fast.
Thank you for sharing this celebration with us, the celebration of a truly beautiful life. All are welcome to visit the meditation garden just out here for a time of quiet reflection. There will be a reception for family and friends held just to the east in this room. And for those of you who have not already signed the guest book, please do that. Those looking for that information about the Elisabeth Christina Salm Fund, it's on your right-hand side towards the back. We will close with 2 songs sung by Mindy Jostin, another favorite musician of Elisabeth. Mindy was an American singer and multi-instrumentalist, and she was the friend of a sister of a friend of Elisabeth. Thank you.
eyes, you're a fire, never goes out. A light on the top of a hill. In his eyes, you're a poet, a painter, a prophet, with a mission of